And it was in 2005, which is 20 years later, that the government of Maharashtra and the Mumbai Municipal Corporation put together a special scheme through which now there is a relocation of these 28,000 households who live on the pavements. So it took 20 years, but that is done on the basis of a survey that was conducted by communities and legitimated by the state. And that for me is my starting point in the conversation today. So the organizations that I work with of the urban poor have produced an amazing instrument in which they do household surveys, they number each house, they measure each house, and until now digitalization came, but we actually did it. Next slide. Building block, in my opinion, of the challenge of mapping who lives where and whose land this is. So what we do is that we start by doing this. Next slide. Then we get in people who make these maps, and they use those maps to produce this. This particular map is a very interesting thing that created history in the city of Mumbai. Mumbai had this Mumbai Urban Transport Project in which 35,000 households living on the streets and along the railway track needed to be relocated for infrastructure. The bank, the railways and the government of Maharashtra produced a very interesting relocation policy, but embedded in that was a right of communities to design and develop the rehabilitation strategy, in which every one of these households mapped every number, every household was given numbers, and then each of them were entitled to 21 square meters of an alternate housing plot. So this is what we've done last year. And it was done, we were in search of a policy that would appropriate this process. Next. Now we even, as a result of the BSUP program we started, the Federation now also provides the ID cards which are needed now to get access to subsidies. Next. What we then began is to say, if we had to do this at a city level, we looked for a city that was ready to work with us, and the city of Cuttack in Orissa is there in a partnership with us and UN Habitat in what they call the Global Land Tool Network strategy to map, to have communities map all the informal settlements in the city. But the added thing that we've done in this is we've also looked at the different kinds of vulnerabilities that these people face. You know, when we talk of technology, the biggest challenge in technology is that most technology excludes majority of the people. It's so, it requires complex understanding, very sophisticated management, and therefore poor people are always excluded. So the other thing we're trying to do is to say, can we start this information gathering on open source, simple data which is available to everybody, and then create layers where once this information is properly examined and accepted by the city and the state or whoever is the authority, it gets included or pulled up into the more sophisticated information system. So what are these handshakes that we're talking about? Because that is the seamlessness challenge that we have. Because I can assure you that every time a professional consultant goes into communities with 10 and 15 page data sets, by the second page he starts getting rubbish information. Poor people don't like to talk for more than 10 minutes. So if your information gathering system is more than 10 minutes, and it tries to produce all the data that every department in the government wants, it's going to produce data that is not going to stand verification. We have a suggestion of how this should be divided into 5 phases. Next. So the first phase we're saying is create conditions by which civil society groups and communities collect data. Today, everybody who's outside the state machinery or the consultants they hire is excluded from participating in this process. So there is no stake that anybody builds into this process. So we're saying, let this preliminary data be collected by civil society organizations or people who are outside, who are from communities who do that. Second, we say it's important to identify clearly who owns these lands in the present data and information. Most municipalities, even in the present BSUP project, as I will illustrate later, will show that halfway through a project you suddenly realize that half of the slum is on private land and half is on government land. But you've given a work order. So what are the kind of risks you face there? You have all kinds of complications and problems. So we're saying that we identify the land, the ownership issues, we look at the development plan reservations, we look at vulnerabilities, and then we say the state government has to take a call on what to do to address these issues. It's very difficult for municipalities to take a call on what to do with land. That's the state government. Like Dr. Mohanty said, there are a whole range of laws that have to be addressed. In half of the city, slums are on either central government land or forest lands. What are we going to do with this? How is this negotiation going to occur? If that doesn't happen, or we say, we'll deal with it later, it will just rupture this whole process. So what is the call that you want to take? How do you want to deal with it? You could pick up the low-hanging fruits to start the process in some places, but you need a tenacious, decadal strategy to address the issue of land. So I just want to give you a small example of one project of BSUP that I'm following in Pune that reflects all these problems, but also demonstrates the potential of how communities can participate in every aspect of it, provided there is time given for it. So just go ahead. Just go through this fast. You can't see these two things. The Municipal Commissioner of Pune many years ago in a meeting with the UPA Ministry in Maharashtra said that there are many slums in which half the houses are constructed well and half are very bad. So these communities in these 7 localities identified households who were vulnerable and could not build their houses and produced a scheme for 1,100 houses of these. Next. Every single household was mapped. It was color coded. Next. It was color coded in terms of which houses had which kinds of problems. The document, and the houses in the yellow are the ones that were going to be using the subsidy under BSUP. The other houses were fully built houses, didn't require any subsidy. Next. And there were community meetings in which designs and different kinds of plans were discussed. And we had to work with professionals to actually produce solutions that communities accepted, and we found that most of them didn't fit into the norms and standards of the municipality's present process. So that had to be renegotiated. Next. And so different typologies were developed. Next. Just go on, yeah. Next. These were all our negotiations where communities actually put this together. And finally, these were the kinds of households that then got access to the subsidies. And the city then gave infrastructure to the whole settlement now in order to do this. So unless people see a clear outcome of their participation in this whole process, the cynicism with which poor people look at government policies and processes will rupture these wonderful plans.